the friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
To get the Crime Writers on Aftershow right now, go to patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And this week, a powerful South Carolina family implodes as its members are connected to fraud, calamity, obstruction, and a double homicide. We'll discuss the podcast Murdaugh Murders. Plus, she began a religious-based diet program and grew her church into a Christian cult. We'll review the HBO Max series The Way Down. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of the These Are Their Stories podcast and the Undisclosed Addendum, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Also with us is...
I'm so happy to be here.
You're my favorite, Kevin. Totally my favorite.
Thank you.
Crime writer.
Thank you,
Yes.
Laura. I appreciate it.
Also my favorite, Kevin.
Thank you. Thumbs up for me. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Also with us is private investigator.
I'm just so happy that people are appreciating the things that I bring to, the group. It's like we're 4 equal parts and, the love is great. Thanks, everybody.
You no longer feel like the Ringo or George Harrison of the group anymore.
No.
You're my favorite too, Kevin.
Thanks, Toby.
There's so much
no
love
problem,
right
man.
now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I always think of the first time listener every time some shit like this happens. Also with us is private investigator.
Because Ringo actually was a very important part of the Beatles too. He had a lot of personality.
Yes, Yellow
He's still with us, of course. Yeah.
And Yellow Submarine is their best song. Everyone knows.
Cute as a button.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of the best-selling Dead on Deadline, scooter stunt driver.
That's Laura Bricker. Hello, Laura.
And our next leggings model, Laura Bricker. Hello, Laura.
Hello. I only wish that my leggings had arrived in time for my scooter stunt for public access. But maybe they'll be here next week for the finale, so you can only hope.
And finally...
You're my favorite crime writer, Laura.
Thanks, Toby.
This is off the rails. And finally, our captain
Wait a minute, you just said I
cynicism.
was your favorite crime writer, Toby.
It keeps changing.
Oh my God,
okay.
This is devolving. Finally, are we even qualified to give criticism tonight? Finally, our
I am
captain...
so tired now.
Our captain...
I need some time off.
Yeah, pass me some mimosas.
Our captain of woke cynicism, the author of the City Trilogy, host of the Strange Arrivals podcast with iHeart, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hello, Toby.
Hello, Rebecca.
Now, Kevin, there's something that you wanted to give a call back to tonight, something that I am wearing an homage to. That is, of course, our incredibly ugly Crime Writers on leggings that you designed in honor of our Lula Rich review.
Yeah, and our son Henry said we missed the boat completely by not calling these Laura Rich.
Yes, Laura Rowe.
Laura Rowe
Correct.
leggings.
No.
And ever since we talked about it, people keep buying the leggings, and I'm starting to feel a little embarrassed.
Yes, I think we should have a leggings of the week where you design a new pair of incredibly ugly leggings every week. We've had some suggestions from listeners. Leggings with giant thumbs all over them is one
Yeah, you know where the
suggestion.
thumbs would end up getting stuck?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why not?
I want some fuck Doug Evans leggings.
Exactly. That was another suggestion from listeners were fuck Doug Evans leggings.
Fuck Doug Evans,
And
man.
other suggestions, were leggings that had a theme of each of the four of us. Like we each get a special pair. Toby's would be like giant Toby heads with like perhaps some like UFO imagery. There was like Laura with cats. Kevin with, I don't know, like sad frowny faces and not being
Kevin
the favorite.
with a baseball mitt because he's the big ump.
Yes.
Umps don't wear mitts.
Me with, I don't
Laura.
know,
Well,
giant
what's
hair.
it
Maybe
called then?
big chest protector.
A mask.
Kevin with a big chest.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, Kevin, I think that's a challenge. I was thinking the big bobbleheads like design would be a good one.
Okay. People want
Listen,
leggings.
this is not a scam, guys. We make 4
When you
cents.
say people, that's like a plural. So is that more than 10?
It's come to feel like a challenge because the leggings, by the way, I'm wearing them right now. They are incredibly soft. They're not like we don't make them. They're not made by some sad, like, you know.
You don't know that. Don't make a promise we can't
don't.
keep about
no
labor.
idea. We have no idea where these leggings
they're made
come
by
from.
Threadless, which is a reputable
Yeah.
company that makes merch for a lot of things, and the leggings are very high quality. I
Yeah.
can attest. I've washed them like 4
You're
times.
wearing them. You're literally wearing them right now.
They're soft. They're like my favorite pair of leggings. They're wonderful quality. They just happen to be hideous because Kevin designed them on purpose to be hideous, and they've become like a challenge.
Wait. I did not actually design them on purpose to be hideous.
But they are in fact hideous.
Well, now I see them on people's legs. Yeah.
They look like you know how when you see at the Olympics like ski racers that have like the leggings that have like sponsorships all over them that like have to look that way because like they're sponsored by like Saab and Budweiser and whatever, and it's everywhere. They look like that, except it's just our logo in many sizes, some of which are blurry. They're real bad, but they're great.
Plus, we don't pay you to wear them.
Exactly.
You pay us.
No, you pay us. No, you pay Threadless, and we get 4 cents. We're not making any money off these things, guys.
We're making no money. I have an idea. I'm having an idea. Kevin, when are you doing the high heel challenge again?
I didn't do it this year.
No, we couldn't do it.
never
We
mind.
had,
I was
we
gonna
had
even
another
donate, yeah.
commitment. We had another commitment. We just donated some money. Yeah.
Okay, well, next time you do it, you need to wear the leggings with the red pumps.
Oh, it's a good idea.
Oh, I could do that. Yeah.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah, I could fit my tush in one of those.
Anyway, if you are a listener in your game, and if you order a pair of these hideous leggings, we'd love to see a picture of you in them. And if you have an idea for a leggings of the week design, we'd love to know your idea. Send us an email at crimewriterson@gmail.com or tweet to us. I think it's an amazing idea. I'm a fan, and I just want to see leggings with Toby's face all over them. That's an idea that I have.
Who doesn't?
Who wouldn't want to see that?
Exactly.
And then when my leggings are the least sold, I'm going to be all depressed again.
You're complex. Kevin, I have an idea. Kevin's circle beard leggings. Just like circle beards all
Yeah, you know
over
where
them.
those circle beards end up showing up.
Well, at least his hair is cut now.
That's right.
It's perfect.
Call it the Brazilian.
All right. Should we go ahead and do our first review?
Well, for
Are we
fuck's
about to
sake, let's
start?
do it. Yeah.
All right. Let's get it done. Leading off.
She was so charismatic, and the joy on Gwen's face when she would talk about the Lord, and when Gwen would talk about just her relationship with God, there was so much joy there that you wanted what she had.
Gwen Shamlin earned fame and fortune with a diet program heavy on religious devotion. The Way Down method encouraged followers to give their hunger pains to God, with weight loss results being indicative of one's level of piety.
God revealed to me that this was the true deliverance and that the key to permanent weight control is a matter of the heart.
But when her religious dogma veered away from traditional theology and her remnant fellowship church was shunned by mainstream Christianity, Shamlin's church took on the trappings of a cult with her and her family at the center.
It's all smoke and mirrors. This is not about theology at all. That's all a sideshow. It's about money, prestige, power.
The Way Down, God, Greed, and the Cult of Gwen Shamblin from HBO Max looks at Shamblin's rise and tragic fall and probes the accusations of physical and emotional abuse within the Remnant Fellowship. Now, we are going to be talking about plot points for The Way Down, so to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes to hear our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. All right, so Kevin, the documentary starts with a plane crash, which, as we find out in the timeline, spoiler alert, happens very late into the making of this documentary.
Yeah.
So just think about that, knowing what we know now. It is a very dramatic way to start the documentary. So can you just talk about that at first?
Yeah, well, I mean, it ends up creating a lot of tension and urgency for the documentary because they don't say who's involved in the plane crash. We know it's multiple people. So even though one may suspect that it's Gwen or other high leaders, there are other people there, so you don't know who that might be. And then, for example, we meet this family where there's a father and a mother who are talking about their young daughter who has sort of fallen in love with somebody in the church and is getting sort of pulled away. So I end up fearing for that family, right? Yeah. In the end, the documentarians didn't do anything dishonest. They didn't pull a fast one on anybody by, like, making you think someone's dead when they aren't or vice versa. But the plane crash just naturally infuses this sense of drama around what is happening in the fellowship. And this is even before we get to learn anything about them.
Right. But Toby, to my original point, you realize at the end that they were making this film because this plane crash, like, it just happened.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like they started making this film in June. They'd been making this for like a couple of years. And the central person that they were looking into in this died. So when you finish this, and I hate to jump to the end because there's a lot here that we are going to talk about, but I mean, I can't stop thinking about this when I think about this film. There's many things that I can't stop thinking about, but like that just is something that I can't, just from terms of a filmmaking perspective. So can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, I think it's hard not to watch it and think like, what were they, just one day they got the news that this project that they've been working on for, I assume, at least a couple of years, the subject has died in a plane crash. So it must have been like one of those oh fuck moments.
Or a yeah fuck moment.
It's interesting because while I was watching it, I was like, okay, I wonder what they had to do to go back and change things. And it doesn't really seem like they did very much at all. There's a little bit at the very end where they show that the daughter has kind of taken over.
Yeah.
And I guess they talk a little bit in the middle about how, despite the fact that the son was older, that it looked like the daughter was going to be the one who took it over eventually because he was sort of not 100% in the fold, I guess. But other than that, I mean, it seems like it plays out the way it would have played out if that plane crash hadn't happened, except for the very beginning and the very end. The rest of it just seems like it's not like they diminish her role in everything, or there's some kind of like going at her with kid gloves because she's passed away. I mean, it remains just like a very harsh indictment of her and the church and everything that sort of surrounds her.
I mean, it seemed to me like I was imagining that what it would have, I mean, it still is. I mean, I feel like also the daughter stuff was probably made more of a focus because of the plane crash, because of the way that it ends is like so unbelievable. 3 weeks later, we see this daughter who's basically become a skeleton, like a shell of her former self, taking over the church, like 3 weeks after her mother dies in this plane crash, which is so awful and creepy and terrible. But I thought before, like I was imagining that it was more of like a Scientology story because we have this family who's like, they have a daughter that's in it. I don't know if you guys thought this, but the first like episode and a half, I was like, oh, Delaney's dead. Like she's got to be dead, right? Because they're talking about her like in the past tense, basically. But then we have this wedding scene like filmed by HBO, apparently, like in the present tense.
It was surreal that the wedding went ahead in light of the tragedy that had just happened earlier that morning.
The information that we know at this time is that a small jet left Smyrna Airport just around 11 o'clock this morning, heading to Palm Beach International.
And we have all these people like the woman fighting to get her daughter back from Gwen and her super fucking creepy Fabio husband, Joe. Like it felt very much like it was going to be a Scientology thing, like fighting to get people out. that seemed like it was going to be what it was about, like juxtaposed with the story of this child abuse thing. And then like that was going to be the main thing. And it still was. Like, I agree with you. Laura, what do you think about that? Like just the sort of shifting focus kind of thing? Because the plane crash had to have like mixed this whole thing up, right?
Yeah. Well, when I first was kind of looking at this, I'm like, wait a minute. I had to remind myself, okay, they were actually filming this prior to this plane crash happening, not as a reaction to this plane crash happening. And, we've all had crazy stories where we're reporting something or in the middle of something and it completely shifts direction. But in this case, I did feel like, though, Rebecca, back to this like shift in focus, when you're saying you don't feel like it's like a Scientology thing, I did feel like it was a Scientology thing.
It totally is.
Yeah. Like I totally felt like it was like Scientology, Nashville style.
Yeah.
Like, where's the like pedal cab with all the people yelling, when they drive by, ding, 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 down around the church. But there is a certain irony to that daughter then coming in and taking over 3 weeks after. And like, you're thinking, my God, she looks horrible. She's skinny as a rail. But if she's following their doctrine, she's not even supposed to grieve all these people that died. So like, big whoop that she's taking over 3 weeks later. You know what I mean? It's just that whole part of the way that they were like taught to like not grieve and carry on like smiley faces no matter what. I found that really put to the test when like pretty much all of them get killed in that plane crash,
Yeah, so a lot of times things happen during the course of the news gathering or the production that does change things. I'm thinking about the Aaron Hernandez documentary where he killed himself in the middle of it. We've got the Murdaugh murders, which we're going to be talking about. That takes a strange twist in real time as well.
No shit, like between episodes.
Yeah, but I do believe there are probably people that came forward and felt more comfortable talking after Gwen was dead.
Probably. We certainly have some very outspoken former church members in this documentary. And Kevin, you certainly have some characters that you fell in love with. Some real people that you fell in love with in the documentary who like were just like, this fucking bullshit, what they did here, what they put me through. You like learned some expressions that you are now using in our regular life.
Oh my God. From that guy, what's his name? Bob Beebe?
The rancher?
Yeah, I love that guy.
There was also one former member who was like, miss me with that shit.
Yes, that's your favorite.
Yeah, miss me with that.
Yep. So we have a lot going on. And I just kept thinking, especially with this diet stuff, when are we going to see Oprah in this documentary? Like, she was missing.
Yeah.
Didn't you think she was going to show up at any moment? Like, we're going to have the Oprah clip? Because we saw that Gwen showed up on all these other national news programs. Like, she was taken seriously in the early part of this because there was this whole business around religion and weight loss, which, by the way, does not surprise me in any way because weight loss is a huge industry. And as we know, evangelical stuff is a huge industry. So it doesn't surprise me there's crossover there. But like, she was mainstreaming it for quite a while. So didn't you feel like Oprah was going to pop up at any moment?
Yeah, I'm surprised she missed it. It might not be new agey enough. It's pretty old school.
Yeah.
It's a weird juxtaposition, right? Because it is... the whole weight thing is such a surface aspect of people where I think religion is supposed to be, feeding a sort of deeper need or whatever. And so it's a weird juxtaposition. I was a little surprised that they didn't spend a little more time kind of trying to tie it all to other stuff that was going on at the time. Because I do think that was, it was around that time that the whole idea about what's the effect of this ideal of like this overly thin female body type being sort of put up there as what should be attainable to people, and what the effect that was having on girls and women was. I might be misremembering, but it seems like that was sort of the 80s and 90s. So that at the same time, that's kind of going on. You've got this. Gwen herself becomes skeletal. She really looks unhealthy. And her daughter, I think to me, like one of the most sort of shocking and haunting things about this entire documentary is the transformation of her after her child dies, and she's not allowed to grieve it because that would sort of be acknowledging that God isn't like blessing their family. And, there's this whole other witch hunt aspect to it. But she suddenly turns into like this very... she looks like a wraith. She's just so thin and hollowed out, and I just assume some of it's makeup, but she looks really bad.
Trust me, Toby, she would look worse without makeup. Like,
I mean that's entirely true. But she looks haunted, and I'm sure she was.
And she looks unwell.
Yeah,
I mean that's not a being chauvinistic or anything. She's just not healthy.
No, her brother doesn't look that great at times too. But I think for different reasons.
Yeah. Can the women talk about her hair just because the guys really
Gwen's
can't?
Hair?
Yeah.
Gwen's hair? Well, yeah. So let's
it's something.
There's actually a lot to talk about here that like women can talk about that men can't talk about.
Yeah.
It has to do with just stuff that we understand that you don't. Okay, so let's get into it, Laura. So we'll talk about the hair in a second. The one thing that Toby just mentioned about body stuff, I do think that Laura, you and I and every woman listening to this understand that despite the kind of healthy place that I think you and I are both at, like I am 47 years old, I know you're younger than I am. Most women have been through a point in their life where you would fucking do anything to be like the weight that you think you're supposed to be. So even I can relate to not the cult religion part, but the idea of like, yeah, I'll try this. I'll try this. I'll try this. I'll try this. At some point in my life, I've tried something that I didn't think I was going to try. I mean, for me, it was in my 30s, like an extreme weight lifting thing with like, quote, clean eating, which I know a lot of people do and they think it's great. For me, it turned into like a very unhealthy, obsessive thing where I looked amazing, but it was totally unsustainable and I killed my metabolism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But this is that for a lot of people. So I do get, like, if you try something and it works, but it's also attached to a fucking weird religious thing, like, sure. And it's also attached to being submissive to your husband, but I also have lost 20 pounds. All right. But it's also attached to maybe, like, my kids are supposed to shut up, but I went out a size 6. Now, that I don't get. But I do kind of like those neural connections because thinness is so valued.
What's the submissive to your husband part?
No, but Laura,
nice try, Kevin.
But
Nice
Laura,
try.
that path, that path. Well, what was the expression that Weight Watchers used? Nothing tastes as good as thin feels. Like that was the thing, like in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, that thin feels better than anything could taste or anything else could be. And that was the promise of this. So I don't know, like, I'm not saying I get it. I'm not saying I agree with it, but the path is something that I relate to in a weird way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you're saying you're not joining the diet weight loss religious cult, but
I don't blame the women who did, because I did join the weird fucking gym cult where I ate nothing but like broccoli and chicken and had one cheat day a week, because that was like also really unhealthy in its own way.
No, I can totally relate to this because we all go through different stages, and I remember I'm in my like mid to late 30s, and you look around at all your parent friends, and you're like, okay. So either people are going on these crazy like keto diets, running 5Ks, doing the Tough Mudders, doing all that stuff, or they're like there's no in between that's healthy. And so you're either like caught up in the cult of whatever your friend gets you roped into in terms of, whatever diet they've got on, or like I even did this whole thing at this women's gym when I turned 40, and it was like, you had to like weigh in every week, and it was like The Biggest Loser, and I got I can see how you get sucked in. But it's like...
But remember that in this neighborhood, they lay it out at the beginning. There's a church on every corner. So the church part is normal.
And that, I have to say, can we just talk about that neighborhood? Because I think for me, that was one of those super fascinating... I don't know if any of you ever watched that show, City Confidential, with that guy with that great voice. He was like, Exeter, New Hampshire. And then he'd go on, it was a quiet town, or was it? And so like, I felt like when we're seeing this town with these like mega churches, and they're in this like, I can't remember what they call it. Was it like the Brentwood bubble or whatever it was, where they're in this like basically bubble with just all these huge mansions, no real connection to the outside world because they've got this sort of strange reality. I mean, you can kind of see how this happens in a way because you're already like one step removed from reality when you're living in this bubble, So it seems like not that much of a stretch to go one more step. And then pretty soon you're like, oh shit, I think I'm in a cult. Like, oops.
Yeah.
But by that point, your kids are there and you can't leave because they'll take your kids. So you're like, well, guess I'll just, so it's really... The hold that they had on people once they got you into that was really something.
Okay, part 2. No one around this woman could tell her that her hair looked like shit.
Yeah,
because
what the
by
fuck?
the way, like, I'm not saying Someone can criticize me on Twitter because I tweeted that, but literally in the documentary they say no one around her could tell her hair looked like shit. No one. Everyone knew her hair looked like shit, but no one could tell her hair looked like shit.
Did she always have that hair?
No, it's gotten taller every year she's been there. No one's going to say anything to her. Everybody's going to tell her it looks wonderful.
How do you think that first of all, how do you even do that?
Teasing.
Here
come on, it's
really?
Teasing. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, come on.
See, my hair won't do that. My hair's super fine, so it would stay like that for like probably 20 minutes and then it would just collapse.
I could do it. You know what? I'm going to do it next week.
You're not praying hard enough.
How about Halloween, Rebecca, this year? We should do our hair like that.
No, that's disrespectful. She's dead. Okay, so
I forgot about. Oh, sorry. Toby's like, I'll do it.
Let's move along. So, Kevin, let's talk about Flynn's Law. Go.
Yeah, I'm just going to call it Flynn's Law. It's that the greater the cult, the more video documentation they have of themselves for the eventual documentary. And here we got another one. I think they have like their own production facility.
Yep.
Which is great if you would someday like to get grifted by Tarzan.
Yeah. Was he grifting or were they using each other?
Well, is that the same thing? I don't know. Really? I just going on what people said. I thought it was odd that this guy who had been sort of playing a part, bouncing around, all of a sudden finds religion when he finds a rich woman with, all the trappings of attention and fame and fortune. I guess I'm just saying I think Joe was probably a gold digger.
I'm looking at your notes.
Wait, I want to set this. I have a question.
Yeah.
Which music video do you like better? Joe Exotic or this dude who's married to the lady with the hair?
The soul of my father is alive inside of me.
Who does it better?
Oh, this dude.
Oh, I would.
This dude.
I am just going to. I'm just going to give my admiration up to God and to say, miss me with that.
I'm just going to say Kevin's notes. You can give your hunger pains to God. Miss me with that bullshit. She married Tarzan. Miss me with that. They have a guy named David Anger who wants it pronounced David Ange. Miss me with that. All of Kevin's notes. So Toby, I'm gonna actually bounce one of Kevin's notes off of you because there is this temptation, because a lot of cults that we look at are run by men, and then there's like a woman second in command who actually makes it possible for the man to be the top, because like the woman second in command like makes the man seem legit by being like the feminist supporter that all the women trust that then the men can abuse. Here we have a cult where there's a woman at the top, which is kind of rare in this space, and you are our resident cult expert. Part of me, feminist, wants to be like, yay, but I'm not like that at all, obviously, because this cult is very anti-feminist in many ways. Can you just talk a little bit about, like, through your lens of expertise in cults, because I think established in this podcast you do have some expertise in, like, cult dynamics, why it's even in some ways, I don't want to say more messed up, but why, like, having a woman at the pinnacle of this is just like, I don't know. It is what it is. But can you just talk about that? Because I had feelings about that I can't quite wrap my head around.
Yeah, well, it's complicated because sort of officially she's not even the head of it, right? There's like 4 men who supposedly are like the church elders and that she's below them. But in actuality, the way it really functions is that she's in charge. It just doesn't look like that way on the org chart. It's weird because it's as blatantly misogynistic, as patriarchal as any cult that I think we've seen so far, with the only exception being Gwen. But she wants, and they talk about how she comes from, I think, the Church of Christ, and how when she was coming up in it, I don't know if it's changed now, it sounded like maybe it changed some, but that women weren't allowed to talk or pray in church or publicly, I guess. So it was extremely, extremely conservative. So she comes from that background. But this whole thing was about pleasing the husband. And, those were the sort of the edicts that she gave to the women, was that that's your role.
Just like LuLaRoe.
Yeah, it was actually very similar to the LuLaRoe kind of mind thing at that time.
Yeah. I thought the other sort of ironic thing was in this one, again, it's kind of like, it's not this sort of sexual abuse stuff that you often see from male cult leaders, but she does. I mean, she trades in her husband for like a strapping, age-appropriate kind of stud, and is just kind of parading him around, you know?
It was so weird, though, because, like, we didn't really even know about the husband, who, you know, but then we're seeing this other guy, like Fabio, everywhere.
You know why you didn't know about him? Because he was fat. He was in the closet.
And it was so, I was like, man, that was where I just felt like it took a really sharp turn.
And then he was also like, he'd actually studied and gotten his whatever divinity degree
religious.
And was just like, you know, I'm not 100% into what's going on here. So he would stop showing up. But
it sounds like that if she had not changed the dogma of the church, where she didn't reject the Trinity, that she could have continued this way down business with evangelical churches forever. Yeah. It's like it was self-inflicted, and that's how you become, now that you're cut off and insular, you actually become insular, and everybody is inside now. It is a cult.
That's how you get called a cult. You know what really surprised me? Which also made them seem more cult-like? So they had this child death, and there's all this like child abuse allegation stuff, which is horrible. And in a lot of these cult stories, as soon as something like this happens, the church or the cult immediately distances themselves from it, right? They're like, whoa, we don't know these people. They didn't do that. They like showed up in court. They supported this family. They were like, no, we're on. And they did not in any way differentiate their teachings from what these parents did to this kid that led to his death. That completely shocked me, because I feel like we see over and over again that as soon as one of these very blatant teaching goes awry and like a child is hurt or a person dies, that's when the cult just pretends like it didn't happen. And that's not what happened here. Laura, did you pick up on that too?
Yeah. So, I mean, that was like, again, the logic here. So you see, you know, you've got this family that has this horrible abuse case, and they have like the weight of the church behind them with like the lawyers and everybody defending them. And then on the flip side, by contrast, then you have this poor woman who tries to leave, who has herself as her own lawyer against all of those church lawyers. So they're willing to speak out also and defend again this family. But then you have the poor daughter of Gwen, and nobody says like boo to her after her child dies. So it's like there's no rhyme or, you know, it's so it's so skewed from what it should be.
I think it's like, what's the authority, right? And I think cults in general, and this cult pretty specifically, doesn't acknowledge sort of secular authority, right? They live by God's law, and they do talk about how they kind of try and stay away from society at large. So I do see, like, when these things happen, quote unquote, naturally, or that aren't coming from government or society in general, like that is seen as like a judgment from God and should be sort of handled accordingly as a higher power. When something's coming from the state or the cops or something, is like, look, you're not the power who we like acquiesce to. We're a different situation. So regardless of whether what's right or wrong, this is the kind of thing that, you know, you're sort of attacking our belief system and our congregation as a whole when you try to assert power over one of our people.
Yeah. So when a child dies after being stuffed in a box, we can handle that. But like, don't tell us that we can't handle that kind of thing. Kevin, just one quick question. Mm-hmm. You and I both groaned out loud when the woman who was the mother of Joe's child decided to represent herself in that custody suit. Yes. We're like, no, don't do that.
No.
Apparently she was a fucking great lawyer for herself.
Put her mind to it.
And she got it on tape that Joe made up that sexual abuse allegation, that the other lawyer for Joe admitted that he was willing to pull it back, which means it was made up. I have to say, I was very uncomfortable initially with her assertions on camera about all of her custody stuff, because it felt like very real time, and it felt very, you know, I know that the kids' images weren't used, but it also felt strange for the parental thing to be used in real time. Granted, she's right. I'm not saying she's wrong to do it, but it also felt, I don't know, it just felt weird. But she's good, right? And she was right.
Yeah, she was right. And she did a great job. And I suppose the case has resolved itself because of tragedy. But I think it was important to the story because it just was another example of how far that church would go, to the lengths to which they would reach and the money they would spend in order to maintain a certain kind of image and to please the head of the church.
I can't believe that Gwen would want Joe's daughter to live with her. I mean, anyway. All right. Well, I think we should do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out The Way Down, God, Greed, and the Cult of Gwen Shamblin on HBO Max? Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for this 3-part documentary on HBO Max?
I'm going to go thumbs up. Just honestly, I sat down to start watching the first episode, and the next thing I know, I had watched the entire thing, and it was like 11 o'clock because I just couldn't believe the world inside this church, inside this weight loss cult, the people, the hair, the music videos, but also just the terrifying nature of this cult, which was basically like the Nashville Scientology. It was fascinating. So I would say give it a watch.
Toby Ball.
Yeah, I kind of felt like it was like missing some mortar or something. Like there's a lot of weird stuff and a lot of things that it exposes about the remnant church, but there's nothing that really ties them together. Like you don't really get a sense of like, how does this all tie together? How does like denying the Trinity and the child abuse and the weight loss, like what does this all mean? It just sort of seems like these random sort of distasteful and downright horrible things that goes on here, but they don't really have any theory or sense of what kind of ties it all together. So, I'm not going to give it a thumbs down. I'll give it kind of an okay thumbs up, but it just seemed like there needed to be something more than just sort of check this out. This is horrible. Check this out. This is horrible. Check this out. This is kind of weird. Check this out. This is horrible. I needed something a little bit more to kind of tie it together and make me understand what was going on.
Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, I was going to talk kind of about what Toby talked about with a cult documentary, unlike a wrongful conviction or unsolved homicide cold case thing. All you really have to do to tell the story is a lot of get a load of this, and isn't this weird? And it does that. So if you have a cult-shaped hunger in your stomach and you need to fill it, give it up to God. No, if you want to watch a cult thing, this is good. It's absolutely suitable. It's a mild thumbs up for me. Nothing wrong with it. But right, it doesn't reveal any greater truths, but it does expose a weird church.
Yeah, you guys are right. Like this documentary could have been like great. I don't know. Do you guys feel that way? Like it could have been great. Like there's a lot of stuff here. It could have been great. Like it was good.
Has some great elements.
Could have been great. Like I had so many moments where I was like, holy shit. Like it could have been great. And it did. It lacked a very strong narrative structure. Like if it had just like a very strong point of view, a very strong narrative structure, like a Jinx style, like hot damn, like narrative structure, it could have been great. It was good. Like I'm giving it a thumbs up. Like I really enjoyed watching it, but it could have been great. So yeah, thumbs up for me. Not a huge thumbs up, but thumbs up. The weight loss stuff, like I hate to say that the weight loss stuff was just better done than the child abuse stuff, because the child abuse stuff should have like really led the thing, because that's worse and it's probably like the lead, but it was kind of buried. But the weight loss stuff was the way in, and that was kind of what made this thing big, and they just did a better job with it. So yeah, I mean, I'm giving the thing a thumbs up. It was good, not great, but yeah, good enough. Thumbs up for me for The Way Down.
Do you ever meet someone who seems kind of off? Whether it's a creepy neighbor or random phone number that keeps calling you, Truthfinder has you covered. You can search for people by name, address, phone number, email, and more. Truthfinder can be especially helpful for running confidential background checks on anyone you're planning to meet from online dating apps. Go to truthfinder.com/podcasts for a special offer. That's truthfinder.com/podcasts to access your special offer today.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
When you're ready to pop the question, the last thing you want to do is second-guess the ring. At BlueNile.com, you can design a one-of-a-kind ring with the ease and convenience of shopping online. Choose your diamond and setting. When you find the one, you'll get it delivered right to your door. Go to BlueNile.com and use promo code WELCOME to get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more. That's code WELCOME at BlueNile.com for $50 off your purchase. BlueNile.com, code WELCOME.
Kevin, here we are in the business section of this podcast.
Section.
What have we got going on our Patreon right now?
Well, we have the new Crime Writers on After Show, and we're going to be talking a little more about the Murdaugh murders.
Yes, and we're going to be talking
Only
a little...
because, we're about to do that in the show.
Yes.
But we feel like there's probably going to be so much more that we want to touch on, so...
Yeah, can I just expand on that?
Yeah.
Because a lot about sort of like the style of the podcast, and we're going to talk about the case a lot in our review, right? We're talking a little bit about the style of the podcast, but we're not going to get like super in the weeds in the style of the podcast, but I have questions.
Okay.
And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the after show. And what else are we going to be talking about in the after show?
We're going to talk about the season finale of Murder in Alliance. This started off as a Maggie Freleng podcast looking at perhaps a wrongful conviction. And throughout the course of her investigation, she came to a completely different conclusion at the end.
Yeah.
Which is very different from what we see a lot of times in podcasts. And so we want to talk a little more about how does one get there, and what does one do?
What would we do?
What would you do if the person you set off to try to exonerate, you had doubts about their innocence?
What if he did it?
Well, I don't know.
I would just say maybe he did it. All right.
Maybe he did it.
What else have we got going on our Patreon, Kevin?
We're going to have a new episode out of Leave It to Bricker.
Yes.
Laura is taking a look at the secret tunnels of Exeter.
Ooh, that's what she said.
The secret tunnels.
Yes, secret tunnels. Barbara at the Historical Society and I are all over this. We're looking for maps of secret tunnels. She's like, I know a man brought us a map. We have to find the map. And then we're going to see if we can get in.
Yeah,
That's what she said.
Laura's looking for a way in the dark tunnel. Okay.
It is Halloween.
Yes,
Kevin.
yes, it is Halloween. The Deep Dive Book Club, the new episode to be recorded next week. The book is called Beast in View, and folks can take part in the book club live on Patreon if you are supporting us at the Crime Writers on Nation level. You can watch the recording with Toby and his two special guests. You've got, Alex Segura?
Correct.
And Kimberly from Date with Dateline.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And this is actually a switch up because usually, Toby, you're doing a nonfiction true crime book. You're doing, this is your first foray, I think, into fiction here, right?
Yeah, we're doing, for the fall, I just thought I'd just throw a little curveball, do 3 fiction books. So we've got this. We've got My Sister is a Serial Killer, which is a Nigerian sort of thriller. I think it's slightly comic. I haven't read it yet, but that's my impression.
And
then Rebecca's doing a little dance because we're doing the new Anthony Horowitz book, which is called, Rebecca?
I don't know. What's it called?
It's called like A Line to Murder or
It's
something.
the
I don't
third
know.
in the trilogy, right? It's the third in the
It's another
series.
one of those clever titles, but it's the third in a line of books where Anthony Horowitz is actually sort of the Watson to what's the lead guy's name?
You haven't read them, Toby?
I've listened to them
Hey,
both. I don't remember the guy's name.
We've already set up that he's doing that later on.
Yes, it's later.
Okay.
Yeah.
But aren't they? They're adapting one of those Anthony Horowitz books into.
It's the other one.
Like,
It's the other one. It's the Magpie
and who's adapting
Murders.
it now?
It's going to be on the. I believe it's going to be on either BBC or it's going to be on the PBS thingies. But I'm so fucking excited about it.
Masterpiece.
Yeah,
That's
it's the
exciting.
Magpie Murders series, which is wonderful. I'm sorry, he's like the most prolific writer. I have no idea how he writes all the books that he writes. He's unbelievable. And he's super nice on Twitter, by the way. He's my favorite writer.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Are you done?
Yes.
Toby, are you done?
I'm so excited to talk about
Laura,
Anthony Horowitz with
apparently
Toby.
I am.
I'm done. I've had
Okay.
enough dark tunnels for one night.
Kevin,
I'm just saying, it's my business section.
before you wrap up with the business section, do we have any Patreon
I'm
patrons?
not done.
Oh,
with
what
that.
else?
For fuck's sake, Rebecca.
What other business do we have?
Well, it's right in front of you. I just want to let people know if you're
Keep doing your business.
Keep doing one last thing. With Halloween coming up, Patreon is doing a special. Whether you support us on Patreon or somebody else on Patreon. Many of the true crime creators on Patreon are taking part in a Halloween trick or treat special, and you'll be able to access content from all of those participating, including Crime Writers On, and either have a trick Maybe it's something that's like outtakes or something scary, or a treat, which might also be something scary. So for us here at Crime Writers On, what we're going to have is a radio play. This is a recording that I did with the group that I formed many years ago called the New Hampshire Radio Theater. And this is going to be a recording of us doing a live rendition of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Wow.
Ooh.
Starring Kevin Flynn as Ichabod Crane.
Young Kevin Flynn.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Young Kevin Flynn.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, I do a voice that is pretty bad, I think. Bad acting.
Really?
So you just have to, I forget how I do it, but
Are
I'm
you
trying
like
to.
Peter Brady as Ichabod Crane?
Yeah, Ichabod Crane is supposed to be kind of, gangly and weak, and I don't know what I was thinking. So.
From the vaults.
From the vault. So that's a special to all of our Patreon friends. You get a chance to
Are you
sample
saying
some
it's a
other
real
stuff.
boner shrinker?
Yeah, you will not.
Rebecca.
Easy.
I thought we were done talking about the dark tunnels.
That's what you call a real headless horseman.
There we go. Thank you.
Kevin, before we end the business section, do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Our Patreon patron saints are Jen Leach and Mary Klein. Bless you.
Bless you guys. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon, and thus ends the business section. Moving on.
I don't know who killed Paul Murdaugh. I don't know who killed Maggie Murdaugh. I can't say who killed Stephen Smith. I don't know who, if anyone, killed Gloria Satterfield. But I think I know who killed Mallory Beach.
They were a powerful family who controlled the legal community in South Carolina's Low Country. But after the double slaying of two of its members, new scrutiny was paid to the Murdaughs' past involvement in a series of deaths, including the trip and fall of a housekeeper, a fatal boating accident, and the unsolved death of a classmate originally classified as a hit and run.
At no point does anyone in any of these reports mention the possibility that he was beaten to death or struck by an object like a baseball bat, and then they would search for evidence for such things.
Host Mandy Matney continually uncovered new indications of embezzlement, insurance fraud, malpractice, and obstruction of justice. Then an unexpected twist in real time threw the story into confusion.
But then yesterday, my news outlet, fitsnews.com, broke a huge story in this saga. Alec Murdaugh was shot on a rural road in Hampton County, South Carolina.
Murdaugh Murders is a unique example of an amateur podcast produced by a professional journalist. Matney's reporting leads the way on the complicated and sensational case. But does the production's rookie mistakes create an insurmountable barrier for the listener? Now, spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about plot points from Murdaugh Murders. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes to hear our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. So a couple of things, Kevin, that I want to get out of the way.
Yeah.
One, there was news that broke right before we started recording this podcast about this case.
Means there'll probably be a new episode out very soon, if not already. Yeah.
Yes, there will. And that is that Alec Murdaugh has been charged in a couple of the big crimes that Mandy Matney actually outlined in the Murdaugh Murders podcast. Second, we do have to talk about, just get it out way up front, that we talk about production and quality and tracking and mixing and amateur versus professional and sound design and all that stuff a lot, and levels in this podcast a lot.
Well, no, we've never had to talk about amateur versus professional.
We have.
No, we've never had an amateur. By amateur, I mean...
Actually amateur.
By literally one person with no resources, no backing, doing it from their kitchen table.
Right.
Which is fine. If this were Wondery, we would shit on this all day long for the production and style mistakes and whatnot.
That being said. This is not 2014, and there are aspects of this podcast that make me feel like I'm listening to a podcast in 2014. That being said, so let's just get it on the table. This podcast sounds like we were talking about a podcast made in 2014 in many ways. It's as if the makers have not in many ways. And by the way, I suspect that Mandy might listen to this review only because I know that they are media conscious folks who read their reviews. And we have many things to say. I've read your notes about this podcast, and I will tell you straight up front, there are many things I love about this podcast. I'm just going to say it right now. But I just want to get it out of the way because I know people are saying it. This podcast sounds terrible in many, many ways. Let's just get it out front.
The production values are very poor.
There are some times where there's tape in this podcast that's only in the right channel.
Oh, my God.
So if you're listening on your left headphone only, which many people do, you cannot hear the podcast at all.
Or if you're like me in the car, you keep leaning over to the passenger side because you couldn't.
It's impossible.
Right.
Yes. It's like you're trolling us.
Yes.
Bro, you fucking smiling like it's fucking funny. My fucking girl.
There are breaths that they're completely cut out. There are parts where there's retracking happening in the middle of sentences. I don't care about dogs barking. That's bullshit. And Mandy, by the way, vocal fry is a bullshit complaint. It doesn't exist.
Agreed.
No one cares about the way you talk. And if they do not fucking listen to them. That doesn't matter. Oh, and by the way, never say someone lights up a room. Just don't write that. Anyway, so
it's cliche.
We're just going to put all that aside because we know that that's true. So that is not going to be the substance of what we're going to talk about. Can we all just agree?
Other than, I will give credit to her fiance for like just going for it and doing it.
Yes.
Even though, like, having spent time doing it, it's a pain.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time.
Yes.
But
does it also not sound like...
He didn't do a great job, but I give him credit for giving it a shot.
But doesn't it also sound like they haven't actually listened to a podcast before sometimes?
They've never listened to a podcast, as far as I can tell. Yeah.
And also maybe the Twitter thing. But anyway, okay. So let's put all of that aside. We're not talking about that. We are talking about the substance and the reporting of the podcast, and we're talking about the case because that is why we are here.
But one more thing, though, before you're right, but because it's not insignificant. When you have unresourced journalism, the journalism suffers because the presentation is part of the journalism.
True.
And that's different from her news gathering because her news gathering is very good.
It's excellent.
Right. And she's just saying it. It's just me at the kitchen table. And so we're going to grade on a scale here. But the news gathering is very good. If there were an editor there, I might say, hey, maybe not so much with complaining about shit in the podcast.
Oh, take it out.
Yeah. You know, it's like...
Don't talk about the reviews.
Don't talk about the reviews. Fine. You know, you don't have to...
We know you have a fiance.
We have a fiance. You want to take a swipe at your soulless corporate former employer. It's like, you don't need to work shit out.
But do, by the way, talk about your fiance's charity events because I fucking love that shit.
Great.
That was great.
And maybe a little less editorializing about what doesn't look good, and so we don't need that.
Yeah.
But the reason why we're even talking about this at all is because the story that she's put together is so compelling.
And she knows more about it than anyone.
It overcomes all of this.
Right.
It overcomes all of this garbage. Okay. This is the best bad podcast I've ever heard.
Right. But can we talk about the things that we love?
Well, I still yell at things while I'm walking down the street. But yes, we can talk about things we love. Like, I can relate to when you are that local journalist and you have been following a story like she has for as long as she has been following it. She's basically, what she's doing is she's just like sitting down at her kitchen table and she is just basically like, I don't want this to sound, it sounds the wrong way when I describe it, but like vomiting out all the information and all the reporting that she has done. And so honestly, for me, the reason that does work is because this case is so freaking bonkers. Like, my friend has been sending me, like, I know y'all love the Daily Mail, all the stories, everything. My other friend's been sending me the New York Times. My minister and I talk about this at breakfast when we go out. Everybody wants to know every detail of this case. So when she just like throws everything out at the wall that she's gotten, including listening to like an entire 911 call, it gives me the opportunity as the person that's listening to sort of draw my own conclusions about the people involved with this, because I'm listening to all the raw material that she's listening to, because it's not really edited. It's just like, here's all the material, we're going to throw it in there. But that gives us the opportunity to listen to everything that's out there.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, like, that is charming, and it works here because of the format. And when I was saying the things about the fiance's charity events, I wasn't actually joking, because in the context of that, it also works. And this is not a diss, because we're moving away from talking about what's bad about the format to talking about what's good about the format, because it does in many places sound like the kitchen table conversation she's having about the case, which, you know, I've been in many like rooms of people pitching podcasts where it's like, I want to hear the conversation that journalists have about the case that they're working on, that they really have at the bar, at the kitchen table. And I'm like, okay, this is literally the conversation that a journalist is having at their kitchen table about the work. But then they're also like, it's very clear that her fiance is making this. And I literally went to Kevin in the middle of listening to this. I was like, I think we need to try to place an ad on this podcast because
Yeah.
like I want to have our ad be next to this polo event because this podcast is about this community. Like she's not just talking about the case, she's talking about the community, and she's describing, when she describes the people in this case, she's also describing the community where she lives. Like that's a vibe that you get, right?
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing kind of feels like one of those found footage movies, you know,
like
where
you
you're
might be
kind
being
of
punked.
like, no, but just, I don't know. It's like, it's kind of, it's a window into this place and these people. And, you know, even like the ads, like add to it, you know? So I feel like it's very evocative in that way. I feel like you guys, where it is, it's like compulsively listenable in that you're just like, oh, what kind of crazy shit's about to happen next? And you know that she's like on the ground and, you know, she's going to know. She does a fair amount of editorializing. And I think there's some choices that get made that I'm interested in hearing what you guys think about. But for the most part, there's so much information in each one of these episodes. And at times it's just like, wait, who is that again? But you do feel like, I don't know, it does feel like you're on the ground with the person who's doing the digging. And she lets you know that that's what's going on. But I can sort of picture this thing where she's like, I'm on top of this huge, interesting story. Everybody's going to be interested in. I work for this local newspaper. How do I get this out there? And thinking, you know, podcasts are big. True crime podcasts are huge. This is going to be like this huge, fascinating story. I'll just make a podcast. And so what they've done is sort of make this data dump podcast, and it works to a certain extent. But it's interesting to hear Kevin say he was listening to it while driving. I was listening to it while driving. About 2/3 of the tape is absolutely unintelligible when you're in a car.
Yeah.
And that includes like when they start slowing people's voices down to disguise them.
Oh, yeah.
And then they've got pretty strong accents and it's going slow.
Yes.
And it's just like, what in God's name is going on there?
You know what I'm saying? Buster Murdaugh, the one we went to school with, did it, and some of his friends, and I'm just sitting here like, why? You know, it makes no sense. He's never said anything bad about Steven. He's never been around Steven.
So I eventually just gave up, and I was just like, okay, just context clues. Because she doesn't repeat, like, occasionally she'll say, well, so what you heard right there was this. But a lot of times she doesn't. She just keeps on going.
Right.
And I was like, just for the people in the cars, can you just say, just to be clear, that dude just said,
yeah,
I ran into a bridge at 25 miles an hour or something.
It's where an editor would help.
There's one other problem with the disguised voices in the podcast. And one is that she says, this person doesn't want to be identified. They disguise the voice, and then they tell you it's a woman and who that person is related to. So it's like, okay, so maybe like don't include those details we're going to say. But I will tell you, so this is something that was a phenomenon of this podcast. First of all, I will say, I listened to all 12 episodes in one listen in one day, which I have never done for
oh my God.
any podcast. So I knew I had to listen to 12 episodes, and I was like, oh my.
They're reasonably timed. There's some that are 15 minutes.
But some of them are 40 minutes.
Yeah, right.
And I did not listen to them at 1.5 speed. I listened to the whole, because I could not stop. And I'm being completely earnest.
You got a lot done in the kitchen that day.
I did, but I am being earnest. I am not, and I did not hate listen. I mean, maybe I hate listen to the first 3 because they were just like, I feel like I may be being punked a little bit. And that was the joke I made earlier, was I was like, is this podcast like pretending like they don't know how to podcast? Because it really felt that way. Because it was, especially with the twitter.com/Mandy Madney. That thing was so funny. But
do you even know how Twitter works?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it was compelling. And I will say, what got me was someone doesn't know about this case when they say Alex Murdaugh. And I was like, fuck yeah. I know how that feels.
What did Lester Holt say tonight?
We were watching the NBC Nightly News tonight when the charges came down, and Lester Holt said, prominent South Carolina lawyer Alex Murdaugh. And I screamed at the TV.
That's heads one of a national newscast.
Alec Murdaugh, you piece of shit. Lester Holt, like, you should know that. And I was like, oh my God, like, I have joined the cult of Mandy Matney. Like, she's not wrong. Like, they should fucking...
I don't know, man. Half the people she talks to call him Alex, or they talk about the Murdaugh boys. I was like, hold on a second.
But that's the whole thing.
Half these people are talking from South Carolina are calling them by the wrong thing.
So Toby, this is what I said to Kevin, like, after episode 5. I'm like, you know what? I've come to realize I don't know what Fitz News is. I don't know if any of this stuff is true. I don't know. But I believe her. I believe her. Like, I believe her. And then what made me believe her the most was the further you get in, and then you get to the case with the nanny.
Oh, that's horrible.
And then she's talking to that lawyer with that case. That came to fruition, and it's true. And her reporting was right. Her reporting is completely fucking solid. So, like, all the dumb stuff, it, like, completely has veracity to me now. And now I'm fucking yelling at Lester Holt on my TV.
So let me ask you this. As journalistic practice is devoting basically an entire episode to listening to a lawyer for one side of a legal argument and presenting that as the truth. Is that kosher?
You can add up all my cases. I've sued over 175 lawyers and law firms. You can add them all up, and it doesn't equal what's going on here. Because this is top to bottom. This is, judges, lawyers, money, everything. Lying, you name it.
We already know that the Murdaughs.
Murdaugh. Toby.
Jesus, now I don't even know what I'm saying.
It's like Murdaugh. It's Murdaugh.
Yeah, the Murdaughs, Alec Murdaugh, or whatever the fuck he pronounces.
Murdaugh.
Alec Murdaugh.
No, it's Alec. She says Alec because of her accent, but it's Alec. It's Alec Murdaugh. Go ahead.
So, like, one of the episodes is basically her letting a lawyer for one side of a case, like, lay out the case while she's like, yup. And it drives me crazy because at the end I was like, I still don't think I totally understand this. It would have been a lot easier if you just told me. But is that kosher? Because when I was done, I was like, I don't know. This seems a little weird that this is news.
Let's ignore the fact that he ended up getting charged for all of that, so that
it was right.
It was correct.
Well, maybe. I mean, it's just charged.
The problem is that, you're right that it could be presented in a different way with a little more of her, either, providing context, breaking up so it's not big chunks of him talking. It would be ideal to, as you say, have other sources on tape telling the same story, backing it up, or if the Murdaugh family, if they wanted to, and I believe that they've declined to comment, to put it in there. The problem is, it doesn't matter because it was such a great story. It's sort of the curse of this podcast.
Yeah,
you're doing it wrong, but I want more.
This case is fucking bonkers, though, because, like, just when you think you know it all, you're like, oh, now there's something new. And it's like a little bit True Detective-y. Like, Toby, were you surprised when you found out how far the dog kennels were from the house?
4 football fields?
I was like...
No, it was 8. It was 8 football fields. I was like... Whoa, like,
how far is 8 football field?
But I just had this image in my head when I heard that of, like, this, like, it just seemed to me like even darker in terms of the way that the wife and son were killed.
Laura, how many times in this podcast I just did a panel, right, about ethics in true crime podcasting. Mm-hmm. One of the questions was, what is the biggest red flag that you should know when a true crime podcast is unethical? My first answer, I gave it was like, what are the 3 red flags? The first thing I said was when the podcast plays the entire 911 call. This podcast has played so many 911 calls.
That's unethical?
Well, because so many unethical podcasts have done that. Like
you're not saying that makes it unethical. You're saying that unethical ones do that. Okay.
That many unethical podcasts do that.
Okay.
Right?
So
they play sensational This podcast has used 911 calls. I will say the strongest parts of this podcast have been the way that they have used 911 calls to illustrate stuff. Body cam stuff. I'm sorry. The horrible audio, the right channel only audio.
It was actually the best audio.
Of the kid talking, calling his mom. Like, I'm sorry. I want to volunteer my services. Like, please, Mandy and your fiance, send me that audio file. I will center channel it for you so that people listening with one headphone can hear it, like, and not completely have it go blank. I'll center channel it for you. That is the best fucking audio I've heard in a podcast in a very long time.
And look, that's when the series actually starts to take off. About the fourth or fifth episode.
Oh my God. Incredible episode.
We're already we're already used to the fact that the audio's all over the place and it's too low. We're already there. Now that we kind of have been primed for who the players are, and we already knew about this accident, when we get into all the descriptions that come from videos and the reports that are now out, it ends up being really rich. Things keep happening in real time. It's information that comes out about past things. Those episodes get really great, and then almost in the middle of it, the patriarch of the family gets shot.
Oh, no, he doesn't.
Or he seems to get shot.
He sets it up questions about that scene.
Yeah.
So many questions. First of all, we have the 911 call where we have Alec calling to report that he's found the body of his wife and his son. And he sounds just absolutely like you can sense like the horror and the panic and everything that's happening to him all at once. But then you also pick up on, as she's listening to it, and again, this is sort of like that real-time reporting, that he's like walking around and doing things at this point while he's on the phone call. So that was very interesting. But I do think what you guys were saying, Kevin and Rebecca, that the strongest tape for me was that tape. And I was like walking along Swayze Parkway listening to this, and I was like, I had to stop and turn it up because I was like, shit, I'm hearing it in one ear. But you almost feel a little voyeuristic because you have this window into such a moment of raw emotion in that tape with the boyfriend whose girlfriend is missing and they can't find her. And he's blaming the son, the Murdaugh son. But you hear like such an authentic emotion in the moment that I think that is the strength of playing that whole tape. And then, hearing him call his mom and finding out later that, she's a police officer.
We hit a bridge in the boat. Connor's fucked up. Connor's messed up bad. We can't find Mallory. Morgan's messed up bad. We can't find Mallory, Mom.
Hearing all that tape and hearing how obvious it was what was happening, and then finding out that the police investigator didn't include any of the real details in the police report, you're like, holy shit, I need those crime writers on leggings because I'm going to be rage walking to like Florida at the point that I'm at right now. You know what I mean?
Hearing that kid say to Paul Murdaugh, you think this is funny? Like like that was incredible. It was an incredible tape. Even though if I only had my left earphone on, I wouldn't have been able to hear it. So, Kevin, can you just talk about the detail that hasn't been mentioned yet about the insurance company thing that you pointed out in your notes?
Yeah, so after the developments about the homicide and then the self-inflicted, self-financed gunshot to the head, a lot happens in the case about the slip and fall of the housekeeper and nanny. What we had heard before was that in the boating case, and by the way, not to speak ill of the dead, but that kid sounded like a real piece of shit, right?
Yeah, on tape.
On tape.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said, I'm going to drive the boat naked and tell everybody, fuck off, and then crash into a bridge. That the insurance company wasn't going to cover the Murdaughs for that boating accident. And that was all coming to a head at the time in the court system. And certainly we think, we assume that the insurance company's not going to pay because their clients seem to have acted recklessly and probably, it's not something they're going to cover. But what we find out now is that he successfully sued or was part of a lawsuit against his own insurance company to pay. They got like $3 million already.
Yes.
So the insurance company might be like, fuck you on a second claim.
Yes.
Right, which we didn't really know about. So I don't know if
he's very good at insurance fraud.
This is why it's such a fascinating case. How does this all play together? I actually thought that the insurance scam, I thought that was actually more interesting than the double homicide at it was told so well.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's so many great things about this story that just dry in.
We've yet to hear more about Buster Murdaugh, who apparently seems to be a looming figure in this.
Yeah, and how he's connected to the Stephen Smith thing.
The Stephen Smith death. I think that's also looming. Toby, you mentioned something that I really love about the podcast too, which is the framing of every single episode. The open to every single episode is very strong, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing that they, from just like a podcasting standpoint, they get completely right is everyone starts with, I know who killed so-and-so, and I'm going to tell you about this, that, and the other thing. Or I don't know who killed this, but when I hear about this, it makes my blood boil, you know? And so it's like, you get this like sort of preview about what's coming, and it's very effective, you know, partly because it's not conventionally organized, I would say. So I think having these cues at the beginning are helpful. They bounce around between stories like crazy. It's like, okay, now we're going to talk about Steve, you know, how Steve died. Now we're going to talk about the boat crash. Now we're going to talk about the double homicide. Now we're back to Steve.
Is that better than like mixing all of those characters in one episode?
No, I mean, I think
I like it. I honestly like the back and forth.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. It's just sort of unconventional. I can't imagine what it would have been like to start at the beginning and just listen to every week, like week after week, like binging it. Like it was only like 40 minutes later, I'd be back on whatever I just left off. If you were waiting like 3 weeks in between some of these things, it was probably a slightly different situation. I mean, I don't mean to be overly critical. I mean, there's just, you know, there's just so much information in each one of these episodes. It's pretty wild.
Well, listen, I'm really tired because doing a true crime review podcast is exhausting. So I think we should do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out the Murdaugh Murders podcast?
Or have a mimosa.
Listen, we're revolutionizing journalism here. Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for the Murdaugh Murders podcast? This is very different than pretty much everything else we review, and I think many of our listeners might be surprised, A, that we're reviewing it, and B, at the level of discourse that we've had around it.
Oh,
so,
no.
Laura,
On Facebook, they're clamoring for us to talk about this.
I think, yeah,
they all say the same thing.
Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for the Murdaugh Murders?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I'm going to say, Rebecca, just a quick aside before I do my review. Thank God you have those leggings on so that now that you're so exhausted, you can take a good relaxing little sleep.
They're very buttery.
A little rest. You can put your feet up. So this podcast is like, when I was listening to it, I was like, oh my God, because I was getting frustrated with like the audio levels were going up and down and I had to keep adjusting, and like I was getting frustrated with like hearing about the excellent fiance all the time. I'm like, can he really be that excellent? No, I'm just kidding. But then the thing is, this is the hard thing about this podcast, is that the production is all over the place. The narrative structure is not like, you know, when we review podcasts, we would like rip something like this apart. However, I am so freaking fascinated by this Murdaugh case. And there are so many tentacles to this case and so many places that this case goes. And this podcast, because she's the local reporter on the ground who's been reporting on this for 2 years, has all the information. So if you are really interested in this case and you want to listen to the entire 911 call, interviews with people, and know sort of the story of how everybody's connected, this is something that you're going to listen to. But you have to sort of temper that with the feeling of listening to it and being extremely frustrated by certain parts of the production. But I feel like she's very earnest, and I feel like she's a good reporter, and I feel like she's getting good material. So on that regard, I would say thumbs up. On production, I mean, I think she probably even knows that, so I don't need to go there.
Toby Ball.
Yeah, I mean, this is a hard one in some ways because, you know, in the last month, we've reviewed, I think, two of the strongest podcasts, both in terms of reporting and, you know, just even moving aside just like sound and how it sounds, but just editorially, like just great editorial choices in the way the story is told and just really making the most of the podcast medium in a way that this one doesn't even try, right? I mean, it's not, there's nothing about podcasting that this thing takes advantage of. It's just a way to get the story out to a bunch of people. I mean, she's basically just talking and there's some tape. At the same time, like, as we've been saying the whole time, it's like, it's a fascinating case. she's all over it. I'll give it a thumbs up. There's just no craft to it, right? There's no craft. It's all reporting. It's all reporting and having obtained audio that's very revealing. So it's just putting those two things together in about as simple a format as possible. But the stuff that she's got is amazing. So thumbs up. I think it is sort of compulsively listenable. I was going to say guilty pleasure, but that's just not right. I don't feel like it's a guilty pleasure because I think the journalism is really strong. And I think guilty pleasure is doing that a disservice. So I'll give it a thumbs up. I mean, it's very, very different, but the case is just wild, and she's got the goods on it.
Kevin Flynn.
This is the most cringeworthy, binge-worthy podcast ever made.
Oh, my heart is exploding.
The production values are, you said, horrible, but the reporting is so compelling. The information is ahead of everybody else's, and the story just keeps taking these twists and turns that it's just impossible to not want to know what's next. We've reviewed this podcast. We're essentially done with it. I want to hear the next episode, even though I'm no longer obligated to listen to it, right? I think that this podcast could have shared a lot of its DNA with something like Undisclosed, which is a very sort of straightforward, we're talking about this investigation, but in addition to, using nice mics and all sorts of nice audio tricks, there's a little bit of music in the background, a little higher production value, right? If you have a news website, the news might be great, but if the website itself looks bad and doesn't work, that's a problem. You might have a great newspaper, but if the ink is all smudged and the paper rips when you pick it up, that's not a good thing. Toby's right. There's not a lot of craft to this. And I think that they know that, and I guess it's not too late to take some of the ad money and have somebody remaster.
No, don't do it.
This. How about just balance the levels so that it's
just
the same
left,
as
right channel
okay.
thing.
All right, whatever. I think it continued. Actually, the last podcast, the production value was probably the best it has been. It's moving along. We normally would have really slayed this if it had been done by anybody else besides a local reporter, admittedly doing this on a laptop at their kitchen table with their fiance who's not an audio engineer. But it's just something that I think you have to hear. And so that's why I can't believe it, but I'm saying thumbs up.
Okay, so I think a lot of people in our Facebook group are going to be shocked that we're giving this 4 thumbs up. I'm giving the Murdaugh murders a huge fucking thumbs up, and here's why. It is objectively a 1 and subjectively a 10, right? So this is the first podcast I have listened to where in the 10 minutes into episode 1, I'm like, this is going to be a Netflix series. And the Netflix series is not going to be about the case. The Netflix series is going to be about the podcaster covering the case. And it is going to be a great Netflix series because basically it's going to be like Bradley Jackson on the morning show, except it's actually going to be good and fleshed out and awesome.
Oh, by the way, fuck that guy for saying that thing about her in court.
Yeah.
That lawyer,
oh my fucking God.
Thing. Before I forget, fuck that guy.
Oh, yeah. Because basically we have here a local reporter who had like some probably shitty, low-paying job at some Gannett or Hearst paper or whatever.
It was a soulless corporation.
Yeah, whatever, Gannett or whatever. And then, and she got another job at like some other low-paying local outlet, but that she enjoys. I don't actually think that she has listened to many podcasts, nor do I think her fiance has. It is like they are in 2014 starting a podcast, except it's 2021. And that is, for lack of a better word, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound condescending. I don't mean it that way. It's adorable. And I feel like I'm being punked. I thought when I was listening to the beginning of this podcast, I'm like, am I being punked? But then I'm like, no, this is absurd to the level where it's high art, but I am learning a lot. I learned so much about this case in this horribly produced podcast. I cannot remember a podcast where I have learned so much about a real-time news event. I mean, I've learned more about this than I've learned like from the Daily about a real-time news event. I honestly can say that. Like, I want to advertise in this podcast. I want to go to her fiance's polo charity events. I want to sign up for that like lunch that you can go to with them. I want to watch the Netflix series. I want to know what's happening in this case. I want to yell at Lester Holt.
You did already.
The help that I want to give them, honestly, is the left channel, right channel stuff. I don't care if the podcast remains bad production-wise, except for that one thing. I have to give the Murdaugh murders a thumbs up, despite the fact that it is objectively terrible, because in every other regard, I gotta say it's great. It's awful, but great. Big thumbs up for me for the Murdaugh murders. What else can I say?
Do you ever meet someone who seems kind of off? Whether it's a creepy neighbor or random phone number that keeps calling you, Truthfinder has you covered. You can search for people by name, address, phone number, email, and more. Truthfinder can be especially helpful for running confidential background checks on anyone you're planning to meet from online dating apps. Go to truthfinder.com/podcasts for a special offer. That's truthfinder.com/podcasts to access your special offer today.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounders.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Jewelry isn't a gift you give just once. It's a way to remind your loved one of a beautiful moment every time they see it. Blue Nile can help you find the gift that says how you feel and says it beautifully, with expert guidance and a wide assortment of jewelry of the highest quality at the best price. Go to BlueNile.com and experience the convenience of shopping Blue Nile, the original online jeweler since 1999. That's BlueNile.com to find the perfect jewelry gift for any occasion. BlueNile.com.
Now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the crime of
the week.
U.S. Marshals conducted a recent sweep of registered sex offenders in Pennsylvania. And since it was in Scranton, they dubbed it Operation Dunder Mifflin. Officials admitted the name is a nod to The Office, the famous sitcom set in their town. The Marshals were verifying the addresses of the offenders, and after checking more than 200 names, they found 13 were not properly registered. The Marshals did not stop by the offices of the Best Paper Supply Company in northern Pennsylvania. If they had, we're sure they'd find Kelly stalking Ryan, Stanley doing a crossword, Pam making copies, Jim pranking Dwight, and Michael blurting, "That's what she said." Panel, pairing the city with the TV show is a great tie-in. What's the next law enforcement operation to do this? Laura Bricker, what do you think?
Well, my town is often compared to this town, so I'm going to go with the Stars Hollow sweep.
Yes.
And there's a lot to sweep up there. I mean, it could be drugs. It could be donuts. I don't know.
Toby Ball, what about you?
Drugs or donuts?
They go together, drugs and donuts.
Operation Land of the Lost, Slee Stack infestation.
Very nice. Kevin Flynn, what about you?
They're going to Miami for Operation Golden Girls.
Yeah.
It's an elderly sex trafficking ring.
Sounds about right. Rose is at it again. All right, Laura Bricker, it is time to wrap up the show. But before we go, do we have a cat of the week this week?
We do have a cat, finally. We haven't had a cat in recent weeks. And this wasn't even nominated, but it was a picture that was posted in the Brichter Scale by our friend Jennifer Tate. And so this is Warrior Queen Eleanor, a.k.a. Princess Sassy Pants, and she is just all over it. And this is what she's doing instead of rage walking. And she's laying on the top of the cat tower, just kind of has her legs like hanging over the side. And I think we've all felt like that at some point in the week. So rock on, Warrior Queen Eleanor. And she is the cat of the week.
Very nice. Now, if people want to submit their cats or dogs or animals of any kind, llamas, emus, again, dogs, of course, they can email us at crimewriterson@gmail.com. But if they want to submit them directly to you, Laura, on Twitter, how can they reach you there?
They can find me at Laura Bricker.
And Toby Ball, folks want to reach out to you and perhaps talk about baseball or basketball or other sports. How can they find you on Twitter?
Baseball?
I know, that's a Kevin thing.
Yeah, at Toby Ball NH.
And Kevin Flynn, if folks want to reach out to you on Twitter and say, "Hey, Kevin, that's a really nice plaid shirt, and you're my favorite crime writer," how can they find you on Twitter?
I'm at twitter.com/Kevin P. Flynn. Wait, well, I'm sorry, I forgot. It's http:// S. No S, that's secure. It's open. I think maybe you can use the S, but try first HTTP or is it TPP? // www. facebook.twitter.com/Kevin P. Flynn.
And of course, you can find me at Reb Lavoie on Twitter and Instagram. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Crime Writers On, and I encourage you to join our incredible community in our official Crime Writers On Facebook discussion group. We also have a regular old Facebook page, but just go there to find the group. Support the show at patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media. You'll get the Crime Writers On After Show, Married with Podcast, Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast, and Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. Plus, leave a 5-star review for this podcast, please, unless you're going to be mean haters and talk about my laugh. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our line editor is the very handsome Olivia Burdett. The executive producer of this fine program is my awesome husband, Kevin Flynn.
And fiancé.
This show was recorded in the Oak Loft above the Bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement, which we will soon abandon so that we can record our podcast at the kitchen table.
Yeah.
On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
So there's like this new little 20-year-old guy at Public Access, and he's doing a Halloween special where he's a ghost terrorizing the town, and nobody wanted to participate in his little show, and I'm like, whatever, I'll do it. So he's like, well, the police aren't there, so can you be the cat detective who apprehends the ghost? So today we filmed our action sequence. I drove 5 miles an hour on my scooter, and then I took off my helmet and I said, I heard you need a ghost detective.
She's the Brazos of Public Access.
Partners in Crime Media.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.